Welcome back. I am so excited that you have joined me again in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. I'm Kate Nagai, and I am your host and womb guide on this journey. I'm here to help you to lean into the language of your menstrual cycle so that you can align yourself and awaken and activate to your womb wisdom to live the most inspired life. I am so excited to jump into this episode and to dive into today's topic. So let's get started. Welcome back to the Aligned Womb, Aligned You, the podcast where we explore how to reconnect with our body, reclaim our energy, and harness that wisdom of our cycle. Before we dive into today's topic, I just wanted to share a little personal win that I'm having because I think too often in life we don't celebrate these wins. Anyways, so Christmas, it was just a month and a half ago. And I'm sure majority of the population, I broke all of my rules that I do. I drank alcohol. I ate way too much. I had lots of sugar. It's Christmas. You bend the rules. But my last cycle, holy henna, breast pain and painful period and all of the things, it hit me. And it really was a beautiful reminder of when we don't take care of the system, this is what happens. But here's the thing I want to share is I am only a few days away from my period right now. And last period, like I said, it was intense, but I got back on track. I did the things that I knew I needed to do. I made sure I ate breakfast in the morning. I upped my protein. I got some good microgreens in. I've been making sure that I've been having broccoli sprouts every day. And I had no breast pain. I had no ovulation pain. And in fact, I don't even remember the last time that I felt this good in my luteal phase, my inner fall phase. There's just new life in the system right now. And I truly do believe, and it's just a great representation, a great reminder that it's the small things. It's just the small things that we do that have such a huge impact on bringing us back into hormonal balance. So that was my little win, is that I am having the best inner fall of my life and I'm getting so much stuff completed. My inner fall is my season to get stuff done. And by that, I don't mean I'm out hustling. I mean, I'm locking myself in a room where I've asked my kids and my husband just to give me space. And I've been able to get those things done that require a little bit more attention that I avoid doing when I want to be a social butterfly in my follicular phase and in my ovulation. And I just feel so good. I feel that the out of this box thinking, those things that, usually stop me, I'm just tending to them right now. And it just goes to show that there's so much power that goes into aligning to our cycle and really living rhythmically. And, if you're curious more about this and my approach to it, I do have the Living in Flow course that, the doors are going to be opening in just a few weeks. We get started in March. But we have a whole module on this where we talk about the whole course is about how to align your life with your cycle. So that way you feel like you're in this optimized state every week, even though you're 4 different versions. But we really look at the work life in particular too. And we have a whole module on it of, how to best use our energy so that we have energy to tend to everything. It's just that we have to break it up into weekly to-dos versus trying to tackle it on a daily basis. So anyways, that's a little side note. Let's dive into today's topic. So today's topic is one that so many women struggle with. And I kind of just hinted at some of it in my experience in my last cycle, which is really about estrogen dominance. Estrogen dominance is really something that we don't talk a lot about. And so many women, I think, deal with it, right? And so if you're dealing with irregular periods or, PMS, mood swings, weight gain, burnout, these could be the missing link to your hormone health, what we're talking about today. So let's break it down. What exactly is estrogen dominance and why should we be concerned about it? And most importantly, what can we do to bring our hormones back into balance so that way we can feel this optimized self? So what is estrogen dominance? Estrogen is one of our primary sex hormones, and it plays a crucial role in ovulation, mood regulation, skin health, and metabolism. It's the hormone that is in its peak, or it's the primary hormone in the first half of our cycle. So it starts to creep in as our bleed starts. It starts to do a small ramp up to those bleed days, but it really becomes prevalent in the what I call our inner spring, so the follicular phase, and then it peaks at ovulation. But the thing to know is, like anything in the body, balance is key. So estrogen dominance happens when we have too much estrogen in relationship to our progesterone, or when estrogen isn't being properly detoxified or eliminated from our body, and therefore it keeps recycling in our system. So this happens for a few reasons. The first one, like we kind of talked about, is that we have low progesterone. Maybe this is because we did not ovulate. Maybe it's because we're having anovulatory cycles. But when progesterone is too low, it creates an imbalance, and our progesterone needs to balance out our estrogen. So we can go into estrogen dominance with low progesterone, even if our estrogen levels are normal, because we don't have that progesterone being higher enough to counterbalance the effects of the estrogen. A second reason this happens is that our body is producing too much estrogen. And this can be due to stress. This can be due to poor diet. This can be due to environmental toxins, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And it could also be because your liver and your gut aren't clearing out that excess estrogen efficiently. So this is leading to estrogen recirculating in your system, which I kind of mentioned a little bit above. Now, just to kind of own in here with a little bit of specifics, our estrogen also becomes out of whack when we have too high of exposures to xenoestrogens. And so these are man-made chemicals that mimic estrogen in the body, and they are found everywhere in our environment. Our household cleaners, our makeup, there's so much. This is where we want to really start to look at how can we choose different products so that way we're keeping that in check. Excess estrogen also happens through body fat. So if we are struggling with weight, just know that fat tissue can increase the circulating levels of estrogen in our body. And this is why a lot of doctors will say even just losing 10% of your weight, so not a big number, this can have a huge impact on your estrogen levels because it's just decreasing it that little bit from what has been your borderline or your line of where you've been sitting. Now, to add on to this a little bit too, one thing I think is so fascinating about our body is that when we go into postmenopause, one of the 3 types of estrogen that we need is actually created in our fat tissue that carries us through our menopausal or postmenopausal years, right? And so, when have a fully functioning ovaries and we're ovulating regularly, the fat tissue can play into increasing this estrogen too much. However, when we go into postmenopause, sometimes the body weight that we put on, especially in the midsection, is because our body is trying to create estrogen to support us for the rest of our life. So just a little tidbit of information. Low levels of B vitamins also impact our estrogen dominance. So deficiency in B vitamins can lead to increasing levels of that circulating estrogen. So once again, looking at how we can help clear out that extra estrogen. And insulin resistance. Insulin resistance raises our aromatase activity, which is an enzyme that that is in charge of converting our androgens into our estrogens, right? And so insulin resistance can also play into excess or dominance of estrogen. If you hear excess estrogen or estrogen dominance, they're the same things. They're interchangeable terms. So why should we be concerned about estrogen dominance? Like, does it really have an impact on our health? So estrogen dominance doesn't just cause annoying period symptoms. It has long-term effects on our health, which is why I really want to bring this topic to the forefront today. So here's why it matters. If you're somebody who experiences heavy and painful periods, this could be a sign, right? So flooding, also irregular patterns of bleeding are all caused by excess estrogen that could be blamed. Shorter menstrual cycles. If you're having a menstrual cycle that is less than 25 days, or you're having more frequent periods in a cycle, this is a sign or could be a sign of estrogen dominance. The third is worsening PMS. So having extreme mood swings, noticing a lot of mood changes in that second half of the cycle. This can be an indicator that we're in estrogen dominance. Because remember, if our progesterone is low, our estrogen's high, and that's what's creating that worsening PMS effect. Number 4 is an increased risk of fibroids and endometriosis. So know that high estrogen levels fuel the growth of fibroids, endometriosis, and they can be linked to increasing chances of breast and endometrial cancers as well. So it's another good reason why we want to keep our estrogen in balance. The fifth one, which I think a lot of us sometimes experience, and it's a reminder, I always think it's our body's way of like signaling to us, hey, estrogen's a little too high, is breast pain and breast swelling before your period. Breast pain is a classic indicator that your estrogen is a little bit out of whack here. If you have luteal phase migraines and headaches, this is another sign of estrogen dominance. Mid-cycle or ovulatory pain can be an indicator of estrogen dominance. Having that bloating, weight gain, especially weight gain around the hips and the belly, this is a classic sign of estrogen dominance because it's linked to that insulin resistance again. So it's making it harder for us to lose weight, and it increases our chances of eventually perhaps getting diabetes. Another thing to be concerned about with estrogen dominance is the increase in anxiety, depression, and brain fog. So estrogen affects our neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which influences our mood and our mental clarity. And then lastly, it can really play into thyroid dysfunction and fatigue. So too much estrogen can suppress the thyroid function, leading to sluggish metabolism, to increase fatigue, and even hair loss. So if you've been feeling or dealing with cycle irregularities or struggling with unexplained symptoms, just know that it could be estrogen dominance that's playing a role here in your body. So let's take a moment and talk about estrogen dominance in perimenopause, because this is a thing. And it's something that we may not be fully aware of or we're not told much about. But estrogen dominance does happen during perimenopause. Many women assume that as they get older and are there on that road, that pathway to menopause, that estrogen naturally just starts to decline. And while that is true in menopause, the years leading up to it, which is perimenopause, are kind of like a roller coaster. So estrogen doesn't just decline in a straight line. It can fluctuate wildly, sometimes surging to high levels than you had in your 20s, which is crazy to think about. And you got to remember that, we're having longer stints without having an ovulation because our ovaries are wanting to retire and are wanting to shut down. So we don't have that progesterone, right? So our progesterone is steadily declining during this time, which is meaning that we're not ovulating as often, which, as you guessed, leads to estrogen dominance. So how does this show up in perimenopause of estrogen dominance? Some of the classic signs you're going to see is heavier, longer, and more painful periods due to estrogen building up that uterine lining. Increased mood swings, irritability, and anxiety as estrogen, once again, impacts those neurotransmitters. And I also think that there is something to play in here. And this is kind of like where my research goes and where I'm particularly interested in is looking at how our life, our expectations, our lifestyle has all changed when we get into this perimenopause phase. So when we start to hit those 40s, we're often juggling so many different roles. Our mental workload is so incredibly high. Everything that we have to think about, from home finances to kids' play dates to school homework to the list just goes on. And women in their 40s, in this perimenopause phase, I think we have all this extra stress. And then when we have this estrogen surges going on, or this this, my brain totally stopped working of what's the word I'm looking for. This pattern of where it's rising and falling. Can't think of the word on the fly here. But that is what's showing, or that's what's impacting this estrogen dominance, which is then amplifying our stress response, which is amplifying how we're feeling so overwhelmed. So another way that this shows up in perimenopause is midsection weight gain, because estrogen influences how we store our fat. We can also see it through sleep disturbances due to estrogen and progesterone imbalances affecting our melatonin and cortisol levels, and worsening PMS and PMDD symptoms, even if you struggled before. Perimenopause is often called a puberty in reverse because our hormones are fluctuating so much. But the good news is that we can support our body through this transition by really trying to nurture or even perhaps minimize the estrogen dominance from making things worse. So we just talked a lot about like all the ways that estrogen dominance is kind of scary and, not great for our health. But I don't want us to demonize estrogen, because there is so many important reasons why we need estrogen. We can't just remove it, right? It's kind of like that whole philosophy of just stop women from ovulating because they don't need progesterone, which now we know we need progesterone because it balances our estrogen dominance. So the same goes with estrogen. There's a purpose for it. There's a reason why we have it in our body, and we really still need it. We just need it to be in check. So rather than demonizing estrogen, let's look at some key functions of estrogen. One of them is the sexual development of our reproductive system. So estrogen is responsible for the development of all of our female characteristics associated with puberty, including the start of our menstrual cycles, our breast development, the growth of our hips and our thighs. It's what causes our cervical fluid to become slippery and plentiful during our ovulatory window. It plays into our libido. Another important aspect is our endometrial health. Estrogen increases the growth and the proliferation of the endometrial layer of the uterus. This is really important for our health of our uterus. We need estrogen for ovulation. It's the estradiol acids in the cycle that release the egg from the ovaries during ovulation. We need estrogen for brain health. It helps us to have optimal brain functions. This is why in the first half of our cycle, we have increased language skills, where we're perhaps like quick thinkers. This is what makes us social. It's important for our bone health. Estrogen supports bone density. So this is our way of preventing osteoporosis in our elderly years. Cardiovascular health. Estrogen helps benefit the heart and the cardiovascular system. It helps with our skin and hair. It helps with our vaginal health. Estrogen supports the vaginal microbiome diversity, the vaginal tissue health, and lubrication. It also helps with the vaginal thickness walls, elasticity, moisture, and it protects the vagina. We know from a few episodes ago that estrogen helps with the urinary tract and pelvic floor muscles, right? It helps us so that we don't have incontinence. It helps with our mood. In conjunction with progesterone, estrogen helps to maintain healthy brain function and mood regulation. And then lastly, it helps with calcium absorption. So estrogen increases intestinal calcium absorption, which is necessary for us to maintain calcium levels in the body. So we see the benefits. We see how it can be really detrimental to our health if we don't keep it in balance. So how do we keep it in balance, right? How to balance our estrogen naturally. So the good news is that we don't have to stay stuck in this estrogen dominant state. There are so many easy ways to bring the body back into balance, and so many ways that our body is very responsive towards. The first one is going to be to support your liver and gut. We really want to help that detoxification process, so we're flushing out the estrogen each cycle. So your liver is responsible for metabolizing and eliminating that estrogen. If it's overwhelmed with processed foods, alcohol, and toxins, excess estrogen will build up. So some ways that we can help with this is eating those cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts to really help with the liver detoxification process. One of the ways that I was told by a nutritionist, because I was estrogen dominant and I was having massive symptoms to show that, was broccoli sprouts. Broccoli sprouts are a great way, and it's because they have a higher level, and I can't remember of what it is. There is a micronutrient in it that's higher than you can get anywhere else, and that just amplifies that detoxification process. And I can swear by it. It definitely works 100%. Drinking dandelion tea or taking a liver-supporting herb like milk thistle is another great way. And then staying hydrated and really focus on fiber-rich foods to really help clear out that excess estrogen through our bowels. The second way is to reduce our exposure to those xenoestrogens that we're seeing in our environment. So those chemicals that we find in plastics, in pesticides, and personal care products that all mimic that estrogen in the body. So, don't go throughout your house and throw everything out. It might feel very overwhelming and be very expensive, but there's some small things that we can do. We can start just making better choices as we replace things in our house. So switching to natural skincare and household products will reduce your toxic exposure. Really like getting rid of everything and not buying products that have fragrance in them. Fragrance is a huge endocrine disruptor. If you see fragrance listed as an ingredient on something, it's going to have an impact. So sorry to break it, but perfumes, the fragrance that's in shampoos and conditioners that you might buy at a drugstore, all of those have a lot of chemicals in it that will create those xenoestrogens in your body. Think about how you're storing your food. Can you switch to glass containers instead of Ziploc containers? Trying to get rid of as much of that plastic as possible. And I think some of us, or a lot of us, know this now. I don't know if I necessarily knew it until I really became focused on it, or maybe I just didn't want to think about it, was microwaving plastic. It's so detrimental. And when plastic has disintegrated in any way, it needs to be disposed of, because if you keep using it, it's going to keep leaching out those bad chemicals. So if you have a cooking spoon, I just threw out a cooking spoon because I noticed that the bottom was bubble, it had little bubble marks, you could tell that the plastic had been manipulated, and I was like, nope, it's gone. I've seen this with the plastic plates. My mom used to have them from IKEA in her cupboard, and after so many washes in the dishwasher, you could see that the plastic was breaking apart, and I convinced her to get rid of those. So this is another thing that we need to think about. So another way to also is to avoid soy-based processed foods, which may create a lot of phytoestrogens that can contribute to estrogen dominance. Now, I'm not saying soy products are horrible. I'm just saying keep them in check, especially if you're having these estrogen dominant symptoms in your body. Sometimes we have to just remove something for a bit until we can help the body balance. And then if you are a vegan or a vegetarian, definitely starting to bring those back in. But if you're noticing those estrogen dominant traits, that might be somewhere that you want to just kind of eliminate for a time being. The third thing that we want to think about is how we manage stress and support our progesterone. So chronic stress leads to high cortisol, which then steals resources from our progesterone production, which worsens our estrogen dominance. So prioritizing our sleep, deep breathing, gentle movement, all to help reduce stress, are going to be really important. You can also use different kind of herbs like ashwagandha. I had to think about that for a minute, to help support hormone balance as well. I've heard of maca helping as well for hormone balance. I don't know if it necessarily helps with stress management, but it does help with hormone balancing as well. And you really just want to ensure that you're ovulating regularly, since progesterone is only produced after ovulation. So if you're not ovulating, we need to work on that, balancing the blood sugar, reducing our stress to really restore our cycle. Another element that I'm going to add here too with the managing stress, this was another one that I was told about and had a huge impact on my body, was not drinking coffee on an empty stomach. So my habit was always to wake up in the morning, have a cup of coffee really quickly, and then get the kids' lunches and breakfast made, and then get them off to school. And then I would come home and I would have my breakfast. The thing is that within that first hour of waking is really our optimal time to try to eat. After that hour, our cortisol will start to spike because it's feeling that starvation, right? And this is really important for women's health and women's hormones. And then if we add that on of just having coffee without having any kind of protein or food in our system, then what happens is that we are essentially activating those adrenals even more so with the coffee. And so we really want to think, it's not that coffee's bad, it's just that you can't drink it on an empty stomach. So if you're a coffee drinker first thing in the morning and you're like, I can't eat right away, because that's me, is I have a protein shake really quickly just so I can have something in my stomach, and then have coffee if you want then. I actually found that once I started doing that, I didn't even want coffee anymore. So it's a rare occurrence for me to drink coffee. I just don't crave it anymore because it helped that much of having breakfast or having a protein shake first thing in the morning to balance that stress response. I think also better sleep played a role in it too. Let's be honest. I got my Oura ring and it keeps me accountable. I really follow my stats quite often, which I love it. I know some people that stresses them out more. For me, it's really kept me accountable. And then the fourth thing that we want to think about is balancing our blood sugar. So blood sugar imbalances can lead to insulin resistance, which encourages the body to store more estrogen. So eat protein, healthy fats, and fiber with every meal to keep your blood sugar stable. Avoid excess sugars and refined carbs, which can cause blood sugar spikes and crashes. Exercising regularly, and in particularly strength training. Strength training is so incredibly helpful when it comes to hormone balancing, more so than it comes to cardio. And this is going to be something that's really important, especially if you're in those perimenopause years. And the fifth one is getting in those omega-3s. Omega-3 is a supplement that I highly recommend, especially because we live in a society where our overconsumption of omega-6s is just so prevalent. Omega-6s, we have so many seed oils, corn oils, like we get so much exposure to omega-6s that taking in a good omega-3 will help balance those, and that will help with decreasing or reducing our inflammation, which will help with our estrogen dominance as well, or those flare-ups from those symptoms. And then get into your B vitamins, especially B12. It really does help with the estrogen detoxification process. And then, I know that we've said this a few different times in a few different ways, but I'm just going to hit it home one more time. Make ovulation your priority. We really want that progesterone to help keep estrogen in check. So if you listen to last week's episode, we talked all about why ovulation is so incredibly important and how the birth control pill in particular, it stops ovulation. So, if we're making ovulation that priority, we have to look at if we're on the birth control pill, knowing that we're not having progesterone in our system then. And that is one of the main ways to keep our estrogen in check. And so those estrogen dominant traits can become very prevalent if we are on the birth control pill. So estrogen dominance, it's incredibly common. So don't listen to this episode going, oh my gosh, what did I do to my body? Or why have I been living this way? A lot of us women, we fluctuate in and out. Like I said, I was estrogen dominant 2 years ago. It took me a few months. Everything evened out. It's been beautiful going forward. And then this Christmas, I don't know if that my system got so used to a few years of having a regular routine that all of a sudden when I pushed the boundaries, I went into estrogen dominance for a cycle. And now my body, like I said, I took care of it and it rebalanced. So our body is here to serve us. But estrogen dominance, it's really incredibly common, especially in perimenopause, but it's not something that we have to live with. So by supporting our liver, reducing our toxin exposure, managing our stress, and balancing our blood sugars, you can really take control of your hormone health and feel better in your body. So I hope this episode really hit home. It gave you some education or information about why your symptoms might be what they are, especially around that period time. And know that if you're struggling with this, I am a great resource. I am here to help you. I do one-on-one coaching. I have 2 programs, but in particular, when we want to get really refined with what's happening in your body, it's the one-on-one coaching that's going to help you. And so I have what I call the hormone reset coaching. You can buy it as a package, or we can just even meet for individual sessions and work on what may be going on and give you some strategies on how you can navigate this. So thank you for tuning in to another week on the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. Until next time, honor your cycle, trust that body, and start to take the steps to reclaiming your health. You have the tools within your own body to get there. Totally trust me on this, that hormone balancing, having a healthy cycle isn't so far out of scope and it isn't unattainable. So, friends, have you had a chance to download my new free ebook? Maybe it's not you. The Truth on PMS and How You Can Take Back Control of Your Cycle is now available. This is truly a book that I think needs to be in the hands of every woman who struggles with the second half of their menstrual cycle. So if this is you, click on the link in the show notes and download your free copy today. And remember to subscribe to this podcast and share a review if you loved this episode. Until next time, remember, womb wisdom equals connection to self, which ultimately equals inspired living.